Sometimes the safest place in the world is not a mansion, a boardroom, or a private jet. Sometimes it is the shoulder of a stranger with a kind heart. The overnight flight from Seattle to Boston had settled into the quiet rhythm only a red-eye could create. The cabin lights had dimmed to a soft amber glow. Overhead bins rested silently above rows of sleeping passengers, and the steady hum of the engines blended into something almost comforting. Outside the window, endless clouds drifted beneath a silver moon, while 37,000 feet below, the world carried on without anyone aboard noticing. Ethan Brooks leaned back carefully in his business class seat, his worn leather jacket folded neatly across his lap. He was not a businessman, and he certainly was not accustomed to seats this comfortable. The ticket had been the result of months of overtime and airline reward points, all saved so he could attend a national maintenance certification program that promised a better future for him and his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Every extra dollar mattered. Every opportunity mattered even more. The certification week had tested him from sunrise until evening through technical lectures, written modules, and hands-on assessments where a missed detail could decide the result. Ethan was flying home with a notebook crowded by corrections and a mind still replaying every question. The qualification could allow him to apply for more advanced maintenance work and, perhaps one day, a schedule that fit Lily's school hours more reliably. He had not told her how nervous he felt before the final assessment. Lily had only said, "Airplanes already trust you, Daddy. The teachers will too." He had carried those words into the examination room and onto the flight home. Ethan glanced at the small photo tucked inside his wallet. Lily smiled back with 2 missing front teeth, proudly hugging the golden retriever they had rescued together the previous spring. He smiled without realizing it before sliding the picture back into place. Across the aisle, conversations faded into whispers. Flight attendants moved between rows, collecting empty cups before allowing the cabin to settle into complete silence. Just as Ethan closed his eyes, someone stopped beside his seat. She looked composed despite the exhaustion written beneath her eyes. Her tailor navy coat, elegant scarf, and understated confidence made her seem like someone accustomed to making impossible decisions before breakfast. Claire Whitmore offered a polite apology as she stepped into the window seat beside him. "Sorry," she whispered softly. "Long week." Ethan nodded with a warm, effortless smile of someone who understood difficult weeks better than most. "I hope you get some rest," she answered with a tired smile that disappeared almost immediately as she fastened her seatbelt and looked out into the darkness beyond the glass. Neither of them spoke again. Minutes passed. The aircraft reached cruising altitude, and the quiet deepened. Claire's phone remained dark in her hand, unread messages piling up unnoticed. Earlier that evening, she had walked away from another 12-hour meeting, another betrayal disguised as business, another room filled with people who admired her success more than they cared about her. She could not remember the last time she had slept more than 3 uninterrupted hours. The constant pressure had become invisible armor, heavy enough that she no longer realized she was wearing it. Somewhere above the Rockies, turbulence gently rippled through the cabin. It was not enough to wake anyone, only enough to shift sleeping heads against windows and blankets across tired shoulders. Claire's breathing slowed. Her grip on the phone relaxed. Then, without warning, her head tilted sideways until it rested gently against Ethan's shoulder. He opened his eyes for just a moment. He could have cleared his throat. He could have shifted away. He could have woken her with a polite apology. Instead, he looked at the peaceful expression that had replaced the tension on her face and noticed something remarkable. For the first time since she had boarded, she no longer looked like a powerful CEO. She simply looked like someone who had finally found enough peace to fall asleep. By sunrise, Claire would discover what that rest had cost the stranger beside her. Ethan barely moved as the hours slipped past. The muscles in his right shoulder gradually stiffened, and a dull ache crept down his arm, but he ignored it without complaint. Every few minutes of flight, an attendant walked softly through the aisle, checking seat belts and offering blankets to passengers who had drifted into deeper sleep. One attendant paused beside Ethan and glanced at Claire resting peacefully against him. She smiled politely and whispered, "Would you like me to wake her so you can get comfortable?" Ethan looked down for only a second before shaking his head almost imperceptibly. "No, thank you," he answered in the same low tone. "She looks like she really needs the rest." The attendant studied him for a brief moment, surprised by the simplicity of his answer, then nodded with genuine respect before continuing down the aisle. Ethan closed his eyes again, but never truly fell asleep. His thoughts wandered home instead. He pictured Lily curled beneath her favorite blue quilt, probably hugging Mr. Biscuit, the old stuffed rabbit she refused to replace despite its missing ear and faded fur. Before boarding the flight, she had insisted on calling him one last time. "Do not forget to eat breakfast, Daddy," she had reminded him with the seriousness only an 8-year-old could possess. Ethan had laughed softly. "I thought I was supposed to remind you about breakfast." "You do," she answered proudly. "But Grandma says grown-ups forget things too." The memory warmed him more than the blanket draped across his lap. Since losing his wife 5 years earlier, life had become a careful balance of school lunches, overtime shifts, homework, grocery lists, and bedtime stories. There had never been enough money, never enough sleep, and certainly never enough time. On mornings when Ethan left before dawn, his mother took Lily to school. On evenings when a repair ran late, he called before bedtime and listened while Lily read one page of her book over the phone. Their routines were imperfect, but their promises were not. Friday pancakes meant Friday pancakes. A science project received the same attention as an aircraft inspection. If Lily woke from a bad dream, Ethan sat beside her until the room felt safe again. She still believed her father could fix almost anything, and he had worked hard to earn that belief without ever pretending that life was easy. Across the cabin, Claire remained completely unaware of the unspoken kindness supporting her. Her breathing had become slow and even the deep rhythm of someone finally escaping weeks of exhaustion. For the first time in months, her forehead was no longer tightened by worry. The tiny lines around her eyes had softened. Even her hand, which still loosely held her silent phone, had relaxed enough that it almost slipped into her lap. The contrast was striking. Hours earlier, she had walked through the airport surrounded by assistants, security personnel, and schedules measured down to the minute. Now none of those titles mattered. She was simply another tired traveler who had unknowingly trusted a stranger. The captain's calm voice eventually filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have begun our descent into Boston. Local time is 6:28 in the morning. Weather is clear with a temperature of 58 degrees. Soft lights gradually brightened overhead. Window shades lifted one by one as pale sunlight spilled across the clouds like liquid gold. Passengers stretched, yawned, and reached for their bags. Ethan remained perfectly still. Only when the aircraft gently banked toward the runway did Claire stir slightly. She shifted closer for a brief moment before slowly opening her eyes. Confusion flickered across her face as she realized where she had been resting. She immediately straightened, brushing a loose strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, her cheeks turning noticeably pink. I am so sorry." Ethan rotated his stiff shoulder as discreetly as he could before offering the same calm smile she had seen the night before. "There is nothing to apologize for," he said warmly. "You look like you finally found some peace." Claire stared at him in complete silence, because after years of hearing people ask what they could gain from her success, she could not remember the last time someone had simply wanted her to sleep. Her embarrassment was already becoming a harder question. Why had he accepted hours of discomfort for someone he did not know? Claire lowered her eyes for a moment, embarrassed in a way that felt strangely unfamiliar. She was accustomed to commanding boardrooms filled with executives twice her age, negotiating billion-dollar acquisitions without flinching, and answering relentless questions from reporters who analyzed every expression on her face. Yet one gentle sentence from a quiet stranger had left her searching for words. "I cannot believe I did that," she said softly. "You must have been uncomfortable the entire flight." Ethan shrugged with an easy smile. "It was only a few hours." She noticed him flexing his right hand ever so slightly before reaching for the overhead compartment. His movements were careful, almost too careful. "Your shoulder," she said. "It is stiff, is it not?" Ethan chuckled quietly. "It will be fine before breakfast." The answer was simple, but it carried no trace of blame. That somehow made Claire feel even more guilty. As passengers began filing into the aisle, everyone seemed eager to reclaim their busy lives. Phones came alive with notifications. Laptop bags slid from overhead bins. Conversations about meetings, connections, and deadlines filled the cabin. Ethan waited patiently until the row ahead had cleared before lifting his worn backpack onto one shoulder. Claire watched him without speaking. His bag was old, but meticulously cared for. His shoes showed years of honest use. His hands carried faint calluses that no expensive lotion could erase. Nothing about him appeared extraordinary, yet she found herself paying closer attention than she had intended. They stepped off the aircraft together into the bright terminal, where morning sunlight poured through enormous glass windows overlooking the runways. Travelers hurried past, pulling rolling suitcases while the scent of fresh coffee drifted through the concourse. Boston had awakened long before the passengers landed. Claire reached in her handbag and removed a business card. The elegant cream paper carried only her name and a direct number. No title, no company logo. She held it toward Ethan. "Please let me buy you breakfast," she said sincerely. "At least let me thank you properly." Ethan glanced at the card, but never reached for it. Instead, he smiled with the same calm kindness that had somehow become more memorable than any impressive introduction. "That is generous," he replied. "But my daughter is waiting for my call before school starts. If I am late, she will think something happened." Claire blinked. "You have a daughter?" "Her name is Lily. She is 8 years old and believes I forget breakfast unless she reminds me." A quiet laugh escaped Claire before she could stop herself. It felt natural, genuine. She had not laughed like that in longer than she cared to admit. "She sounds wonderful." "She is," Ethan answered without hesitation. "She is the best part of every day." An announcement echoed through the terminal, reminding passengers to collect baggage from Carousel 5. Claire looked down at the untouched business card still resting in her hand. "Then at least tell me your name," she said. "Ethan Brooks." He extended his hand with quiet confidence. She accepted it. His handshake was warm, steady, and completely free of calculation. No linugering grip. No attempt to impress. Simply respect. "Claire," she answered. For 1 second, the rest of her introduction rose automatically to her lips. Whitmore Dynamics, Chief Executive Officer, the title that usually entered a room before she did. She let the words go. Ethan had offered only his name, and being simply Claire felt unexpectedly honest. "It was nice meeting you, Ethan." He nodded once. "Likewise. I hope you find more time to rest." Before she could respond, he adjusted his backpack and walked toward the baggage claim with an unhurried stride, disappearing naturally into the morning crowd without ever looking back. Claire remained standing beside the terminal window, still holding the business card she had never given away. For reasons she could not explain, watching that unassuming man disappear among hundreds of strangers felt more unforgettable than any farewell she had experienced inside the executive offices she had once considered the center of her world. Near baggage claim, Ethan made the call he had promised Lily. He told her that he had landed safely, but kept one detail to himself. If traffic allowed, he intended to surprise her before the first school bell. Claire believed the airport had given them a final goodbye. Before the week ended, a school sidewalk would prove otherwise. Claire rode silently through downtown Boston as the city awakened around her. Glass towers reflected the pale morning sun. Commuters hurried across crosswalks with paper coffee cups in hand, and delivery trucks lined the curbs outside office buildings preparing for another demanding day. Normally, she spent the drive reviewing financial reports, answering messages, or rehearsing difficult conversations before reaching headquarters. Today, her tablet remained dark beside her. She looked instead through the tinted window, replaying one moment again and again. "You look like you finally found some peace." The sentence refused to leave her thoughts. Her driver noticed the unusual silence, but wisely said nothing. 20 minutes later, the black sedan stopped beneath the sweeping entrance of Whitmore Dynamics. Employees were already waiting near the revolving doors, straightening their jackets as they prepared for another day under the expectations of one of the country's youngest technology chief executives. Claire stepped inside, greeted politely by receptionists and executives alike, but the familiar rhythm felt strangely distant. The polished marble floors, towering digital displays, and carefully designed lobby had once represented everything she had sacrificed to build. This morning they felt colder than usual. "Good morning, Ms. Whitmore," her executive assistant, Melissa Grant, greeted as she hurried forward with a digital tablet. "The acquisition meeting begins in 18 minutes. Legal needs your approval. Public Relations wants to review tomorrow's interview." And the board chairman requested 10 minutes before lunch. Claire accepted the tablet almost automatically before handing it back unopened. Melissa blinked in surprise. "Please move the interview to next week," Claire said calmly. "And tell the board chairman I will meet him after lunch." Instead, Melissa hesitated. "Is everything all right?" Claire offered a polite smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "I simply need a little space to think." Meanwhile, nearly 30 miles away in a quiet suburban neighborhood, Ethan pulled into the parking lot of Maple Grove Elementary just as the first school bell echoed across the campus. Lily spotted his old pickup truck immediately and came running down the sidewalk wearing a bright yellow backpack nearly half her size. She opened the passenger door before he had even switched off the engine. "You made it," she cheered. Ethan laughed. "I promised I would." She looked carefully at his face. "You look tired." "I'm a little tired." "Did you remember breakfast?" she asked with complete seriousness. Ethan reached into a paper bag and proudly revealed 2 blueberry muffins. Lily folded her arms with exaggerated satisfaction. "See? My reminders work." They shared breakfast together inside the truck, while children and parents crossed the parking lot around them. Lily wanted to know everything about Seattle, including whether the classroom had real airplane engines and whether the instructors had been strict. Ethan admitted that one practical assessment had made his hands sweat. "But you knew how to fix it, right?" she asked. "I knew how to slow down and check my work," he replied. "That is not exactly the same thing." Lily considered the distinction before breaking her muffin in half and handing him the larger piece. Only then did she describe an upcoming science project involving butterflies and wildflowers, speaking so quickly that Ethan could barely keep up. He listened with complete attention, asking questions that made her smile even wider. When she finally climbed out of the truck, she leaned back through the open window. "Do not work too hard today, Daddy." "I will try." "Promise?" Ethan nodded. "I promise." She waved before skipping toward the school entrance, disappearing into a sea of backpacks and laughter. Ethan watched until she safely entered the building before driving away toward the Aviation Maintenance Center, where another long shift awaited him. Neither he nor Claire realized that before the week was over, fate had already arranged another meeting neither of them could have planned. Not in an airport, not on an airplane, but somewhere far more unexpected, where 2 completely different worlds would begin moving toward the same future. The connection waiting there had already begun through 2 children and 2 science projects. 3 days passed with the quiet certainty that life was returning to its ordinary rhythm. Yet neither Ethan nor Claire realized that ordinary days often carried the seeds of extraordinary moments. Friday afternoon arrived wrapped in bright sunshine and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of freshly cut grass across Maple Grove Elementary. Parents gathered outside the front entrance as children poured through the doors with colorful backpacks bouncing against their shoulders, eager to begin the weekend. Ethan parked his aging pickup beneath the shade of a large maple tree and checked the time on the dashboard. He had traded part of his lunch break with a coworker just so he could arrive 10 minutes early. Lily always searched for him the moment she stepped outside, and he never wanted her to wonder whether he would be there. A few parking spaces away, a sleek black sport utility vehicle rolled to a stop. The driver stepped out first before opening the rear passenger door. Claire thanked him with a polite smile and adjusted the light sweater draped over her shoulders. The week had been relentless, but one promise had mattered enough to clear her schedule. Her 10-year-old niece, Emma, had invited her to attend the school's spring science showcase, and Claire had refused to disappoint her. "Aunt Claire," Emma called happily as she ran across the sidewalk, carrying a carefully decorated display board covered with colorful butterflies and handwritten notes. Claire knelt to hug her. "I would not have missed this for anything." Emma beamed with pride. "I won second place." "Second place?" Claire smiled warmly. "That sounded impressive to me." While they talked, Lily hurried out of another classroom carrying her own project, a collection of pressed wildflowers arranged neatly inside a simple wooden frame. She spotted Ethan immediately and raced toward him with unmistakable excitement. "Daddy, look what Mrs. Patterson said." Ethan accepted the certificate she handed him and read every word with complete attention. "Outstanding curiosity and kindness during collaborative learning," he read aloud before looking back at Lily. "I'm more proud of this than you can imagine." Lily grinned before noticing Emma standing nearby. Emma. Lily." The two girls smiled at one another with the easy familiarity of classmates who had spent months sharing crayons, library books, and playground adventures. Emma placed her butterfly display beside Lily's pressed wildflowers and explained that butterflies needed the flowers for food. Lily answered that her project needed Emma's butterflies to make sense. Within seconds, the girls were comparing labels and planning how their separate displays could become one larger garden. Ethan and Claire watched the connection form without a dull prompting. What appeared to be two school assignments had already become another reason for the girls to seek each other out. Claire followed Emma's gaze and suddenly recognized the man standing beside Lily. Ethan looked up at almost the exact same moment. Surprise crossed both of their faces before warm recognition replaced it. "Well," Claire said with a soft laugh as she walked closer, "I was beginning to think the universe enjoyed keeping secrets." Ethan smiled just as naturally. "It certainly has interesting timing." Lily looked from her father to Claire with wide eyes. "Daddy, you know Emma's aunt?" Emma immediately asked. "Aunt Claire, you know Lily's dad?" Claire and Ethan exchanged an amused glance before answering almost together. "We met on a flight." The girls looked delighted by the coincidence. Emma clasped her hands together. "I told you Lily's dad is really nice." Lily nodded enthusiastically. "And I told everyone my daddy makes friends everywhere." Ethan laughed quietly, slightly embarrassed, while Claire noticed something she had missed before. Around dozens of rushing parents and buzzing conversations, Ethan gave every person the same calm attention he had given a stranger on an airplane. Whether speaking to teachers, greeting other parents, or listening to Lily describe every detail of her afternoon, he never seemed hurried. For the first time in years, Claire found herself wondering whether true success might look far less like the towering office waiting downtown and much more like the peaceful man smiling beneath the old maple tree. The girls, however, were not ready for the afternoon to end, and their next request would give Claire her first real glimpse into Ethan's life. The afternoon drifted by more slowly than either of them expected. Parents gradually disappeared from the school grounds, children climbed into waiting cars, and the cheerful noise that had filled the sidewalk faded into birdsong and the gentle rustling of fresh spring leaves. Emma looked at Lily with hopeful eyes. "Do you want to play at the park for a little while?" Lily immediately turned toward Ethan. "Please, Daddy." Before he could answer, Claire smiled. "Only if it does not interrupt your plans." Ethan glanced at his watch before looking back at Lily's eager face. He had planned to spend the afternoon changing the brakes on his pickup truck before work resumed on Monday, but the excitement in his daughter's eyes outweighed another item on his weekend list. "I think the truck can wait another day," he said. Lily threw her arms around his waist. "Thank you." 10 minutes later, the four of them walked toward the small neighborhood park just beyond the school. Children laughed from the swings. A family spread a picnic blanket beneath an oak tree, and the scent of fresh popcorn drifted from a nearby snack stand. Emma and Lily hurried toward the playground, quickly disappearing into a game that required far more imagination than explanation. Ethan and Claire settled onto a weathered wooden bench facing the play area. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence felt surprisingly comfortable. It was Claire who finally smiled. I have attended conferences in 6 different countries this year, and somehow this is the first afternoon I have spent in a park. Ethan looked toward the girls climbing across the play structure. You were probably busy building something important. Claire laughed softly. That depends on who you ask. She paused before adding, what about you? Lily said you work on airplanes. I do maintenance for commercial aircraft, mostly inspections and repairs. That sounds like a tremendous responsibility. Ethan nodded. People trust those airplanes with the people they love. I try to remember that every day. Claire studied him quietly. There was no pride in his voice, only steady conviction. You never mentioned it on the flight. Ethan smiled. You never asked. She could not argue with that. Instead, she found herself asking another question. And Lily? His expression softened immediately. She is my favorite conversation. Claire noticed how naturally he spoke about his daughter. Every answer carried affection instead of obligation. Every story reflected gratitude instead of sacrifice. She reminds me why I get up every morning, he continued. Some days are difficult, but then she smiles, and somehow everything becomes manageable again. Claire lowered her eyes for a moment. You make it sound simple. Ethan gently shook his head. It is not simple. It is just worth it. Those words settled between them. Claire watched Emma push Lily on the swing and admitted that keeping promises to her niece had become harder as Whitmore dynamics expanded. Meetings changed by the hour. Emergencies arrived without warning. Too often, she had tried to compensate for missed time with expensive gifts. Emma remembers whether I came, Claire said. She rarely remembers what I brought. Ethan nodded without judgment. Children notice presents before they understand price. Claire let out a slow breath. The truth did not accuse her, but it did ask something of her. I'm trying to do better. Ethan looked toward Emma and then back at her. You are here now. That is where better usually starts. Claire thought about the countless motivational speeches she had heard from celebrated executives, best-selling authors, and influential consultants. None of them had carried the quiet truth contained in one ordinary sentence spoken by a father sitting on an old park bench. A sudden burst of laughter interrupted her thoughts. Lily and Emma came running toward them, holding 2 colorful pinwheels they had won from a small community booth. Daddy, look. Lily proudly held hers into the breeze as bright colors spun beneath the afternoon sun. Emma smiled at Claire. Aunt Claire, we each got one because we help a little boy find his mom. Ethan looked at both girls with unmistakable pride. That was a kind thing to do. Claire watched the simple exchange with growing admiration. No lecture, no reward, just unforced encouragement. As the girls ran back toward the open field, Claire realized something that surprised her more than anything else. She had spent years searching for extraordinary people in extraordinary places, yet the most remarkable person she had met all year was sitting beside her wearing faded jeans, well-worn work boots, and a gentle smile that never seemed to ask the world for anything in return. What Claire had witnessed for one afternoon would soon repeat across weeks when no audience was present. Over the next several weeks, what began as an unexpected coincidence settled into a gentle routine neither Ethan nor Claire had planned. Whenever Maple Grove Elementary hosted a family activity, Emma and Lily naturally found each other within minutes, and before long the 2 adults found themselves sharing conversations while the girls laughed nearby. There was never any effort to impress. There were no carefully rehearsed stories or polished introductions. Life simply unfolded one ordinary afternoon at a time. Claire gradually discovered that Ethan lived exactly the way he spoke. One rainy Tuesday, she arrived early to pick up Emma and noticed Ethan standing beneath the school entrance holding 2 extra umbrellas. As parents hurried through the parking lot, he handed one to an elderly grandmother struggling to keep her grandson dry. He smiled, wished them a pleasant afternoon, and walked through the rain himself without waiting for thanks. Another evening, she stopped at a neighborhood grocery store after work and unexpectedly spotted him in the checkout line. His cart held simple necessities: fresh fruit, milk, bread, oatmeal, peanut butter, and a small bouquet of yellow daisies. The cashier apologized because the flowers had accidentally been marked at the wrong price. Ethan simply smiled and said, "No worries. Mistakes happen." When he reached his truck, Claire watched from a distance as Lily hugged the flowers against her chest. "Are these really for Grandma?" she asked happily. She said yellow reminds her of spring. Ethan answered as he loaded the groceries. "Then yellow it is." Claire remained inside her own car for several moments after they drove away. She had spent years surrounded by people who measured generosity by expensive gifts and public announcements. Ethan measured it by remembering his mother's favorite color. The difference lingered in her thoughts long after she reached home. A few days later, Emma invited Lily over for an afternoon science project at Claire's house. Ethan arrived exactly on time, carrying a homemade apple pie still warm from the oven. "I hope this is all right," he said. Lily insisted we should not arrive empty-handed. Claire accepted the pie with genuine surprise. "You baked this?" Ethan laughed softly. Lily supervised. "That probably deserves more credit than I do." Throughout the afternoon, while the girls carefully assembled a model of the solar system across the dining room table, Claire noticed countless small details that no business biography could ever capture. Ethan instinctively cleared dishes without being asked. He thanked Emma for including Lily. He repaired a loose chair leg after noticing it wobble. When the family dog wandered into the kitchen carrying muddy paws, he cleaned the floor before anyone else even realized what had happened. None of his kindness seemed performed. None of it searched for recognition. It simply appeared wherever it was needed. Later that evening, after Ethan and Lily had gone home, Emma looked up from the living room sofa. "Aunt Claire." "Yes." "Lily says her dad always tells her that being kind is something you practice every day, just like learning piano or baseball." Claire smiled thoughtfully. "That sounds like something he would say." Emma nodded. "I think he really believes it." Claire walked toward the kitchen where the last slice of homemade pie still rested on the counter. The house felt unusually peaceful. For the first time in many years, she realized she was no longer curious about Ethan because of what he did for a living or how he managed life alone. She admired him because every ordinary day revealed the same enduring truth. His kindness was not something he turned on when people were watching. It was simply who he had chosen to become. Spring gradually gave way to summer. School events became less frequent, but the girls still met at the neighborhood library, the same park, and occasional afternoons at Claire's house. Ethan never treated those meetings as access to Claire's world, and Claire never tried to turn his friendship into a project she could manage. When work forced her to cancel once, she called Emma herself instead of asking Melissa to deliver the message. The disappointment in her niece's voice stayed with her. At the next outing, Claire arrived early, silenced her phone, and remained until the girls were ready to leave. Ethan offered no praise, only a welcoming place on the bench. That absence of judgment made the lesson easier to keep. By the time summer softened toward autumn, their connection no longer felt like a chain of coincidences. It had become a steady part of their lives. At Claire's next company gala, that private understanding would be tested under hundreds of watching eyes. Autumn arrived almost unnoticed, painting the trees around Maple Grove Elementary with shades of crimson and gold. The afternoons grew cooler. Children traded short sleeves for light jackets, and the familiar rhythm of school life continued as if nothing had changed. Yet something had changed, and steadily, inside Claire. She no longer found herself checking her phone every spare minute. She looked forward instead to the afternoons when Emma and Lily played together, because she knew Ethan would probably be there with his calm smile and unhurried way of listening to the world. One Thursday evening, Whitmore Dynamics hosted its annual Community Innovation Gala, inviting local schools, educators, and business leaders to celebrate educational programs funded by the company's charitable foundation. Emma's class had been selected to display their science projects, and naturally Lily's project had been chosen alongside hers. Claire personally encouraged both families to attend. "It will be a fun evening for the girls," she assured Ethan over the phone. "No speeches for them, just exhibits, activities, and dinner." Ethan agreed after confirming that Lily would enjoy herself. When they arrived at the downtown convention center, the contrast between their worlds revealed itself. Guests stepped onto polished marble floors beneath sparkling chandeliers, while waitstaff carried trays of sparkling water and fresh appetizers through elegantly decorated halls. Executives greeted investors with polished smiles, photographers captured every arrival, and reporters searched for notable conversations. Ethan adjusted the sleeves of his neatly pressed navy button-down shirt, one he reserved for weddings, school ceremonies, and church on Christmas Eve. Lily wore a pale blue dress that had belonged to her late cousin, carefully altered by Ethan's mother until it fit perfectly. She looked around with wide eyes, but never let go of her father's hand. Claire noticed them the moment they entered. She walked directly across the room, ignoring several executives waiting to speak with her. "You both look wonderful," she said sincerely. Lily smiled proudly. "Daddy ironed my dress twice because he wanted it to look perfect." Ethan laughed softly. "She is exaggerating. It was only once." Claire smiled at the easy warmth between them before leading the girls toward the student exhibits. Across the ballroom, however, not everyone viewed the scene with the same kindness. Several senior executives exchanged curious glances as they watched their chief executive spending unusually personal time with an unfamiliar man in modest clothes. Quiet whispers drifted through the reception area. "Who is he?" one investor asked. "I have never seen him at any company event," another replied. A third voice answered with misplaced confidence. "Probably someone connected to one of the school programs." Claire paid no attention to the murmurs, but they continued spreading from conversation to conversation. Later, that evening, during dinner, one board member named Richard Lawson approached their table wearing a practiced corporate smile. "Claire," he said pleasantly, "would you introduce us?" Claire stood naturally. "Of course. Richard, this is Ethan Brooks. His daughter and my niece are classmates." Richard extended a polite handshake, but quickly shifted into the familiar language of networking. "Pleasure to meet you. Which company are you with?" Ethan returned the handshake calmly. "I work in commercial aircraft maintenance." For just a fraction of a second, Richard's smile faltered before returning. "Ah, I see." The conversation ended almost as quickly as it had begun, but Claire noticed the subtle change in his expression. She had seen that look countless times before. It was the habit of measuring someone's worth by the title printed on a business card. A few minutes later, while Ethan helped Lily reposition her display, Richard approached Claire near the stage. His voice remained pleasant, but his concern was unmistakable. "People are curious," he said. "You know how quickly a personal association can become a public story." Claire kept her eyes on Lily and Ethan. "He is a parent attending his daughter's school exhibit." Richard lowered his voice further. "I am only asking whether you have considered the attention." Claire turned to face him. "I have considered why this room assumes a man needs wealth or influence before he deserves my respect." Richard's practiced smile tightened. He offered no answer and returned to the board table. The exchange changed nothing about the evening, but it made the room's unspoken judgment impossible for Claire to ignore. Ethan either did not notice or chose not to react. He simply turned back toward Lily as she excitedly explained her science display. Claire watched him listening with complete attention while an elegant ballroom buzzed around them. And for the first time she realized that the room was full of accomplished people, yet the only person who seemed completely secure without proving anything was the man everyone else had underestimated. Minutes later, Claire would have to decide whether to deliver the polished speech in her hands or answer the judgment she had just witnessed. The applause for the student exhibits echoed warmly through the grand ballroom before gradually giving way to the evening's final presentation. Families gathered near the stage while company executives took their seats at reserved tables in the front row. Bright lights illuminated the large screen, displaying photographs of children, teachers, and community volunteers whose lives had been touched by the Foundation's programs. Claire stood just behind the curtain reviewing a brief speech prepared by her communications team. She read the opening sentence twice before closing the folder. None of those carefully chosen words felt honest anymore. Across the room, Ethan knelt beside Lily, helping straighten the ribbon attached to her science display. "You did all the hard work," he told her with a proud smile. "Tonight is simply about enjoying it." Lily looked toward the stage. "Daddy, Do you think they will remember my butterfly project? Ethan gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Maybe they will. But even if they do not, remember something more important. What? Kind people are remembered much longer than perfect projects. Lily smiled and squeezed his hand. Those simple words reached Claire even from several yards away. She folded the prepared speech in half and handed it back to Melissa. We are changing it, her assistant whispered. Claire nodded. Completely. Moments later, the master of ceremonies welcomed everyone and invited Claire onto the stage. A standing ovation greeted her as she stepped beneath the bright lights. She thanked the audience politely before allowing the applause to settle into complete silence. Instead of looking toward the investors seated near the front, she looked across the ballroom until her eyes found Ethan and Lily. This evening, she began calmly. We have celebrated innovation, education, and success. Those things matter. But over the past few months, I have been reminded that the greatest lessons are rarely taught inside boardrooms. Curious murmurs drifted through the audience. Claire continued. Several months ago, I boarded an overnight flight after one of the most exhausting weeks of my career. I was carrying more pressure than I realized, and somewhere above the clouds, I fell asleep. She paused gently before smiling. When I opened my eyes, I discovered I'd spent hours resting on the shoulder of a complete stranger. Soft laughter spread across the room. Claire's voice remained steady. That stranger never woke me. He never complained. He never introduced himself by explaining his accomplishments. He simply allowed another human being to rest. The ballroom became perfectly still. Richard Lawson lowered his eyes. Several executives exchanged quiet glances. Claire looked directly toward Ethan. Since that day, I have watched this man love his daughter with patience, serve his family without recognition, and treat every person with the same quiet respect regardless of their position. He reminded me that dignity does not announce itself. Kindness does not demand attention. Character speaks most clearly when no one expects it to. She smiled warmly before saying the words that had lived in her heart ever since that flight. The safest place I have fallen asleep was not inside one of my homes or behind the doors of my office. It was on the shoulder of a man whose greatest title is simply being Lily's father. For several breathtaking seconds, no one moved. Then one person began clapping. Another followed. Within moments, the entire ballroom rose to its feet in a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. Ethan remained exactly where he was, humbled as Lily wrapped both arms around him with unmistakable pride. Did you know she was going to say that? Lily whispered. Ethan shook his head, still trying to absorb the sight of an entire ballroom, standing because of a choice he had almost forgotten making. Only let someone sleep, he answered. Lily held him tighter. You always say little things count. Ethan looked toward Claire on the stage. For once, he had no simple reply. He had never asked for recognition. He had never tried to impress anyone. Yet in a room filled with power, wealth, and influence, it was the steady strength of a devoted single father that left every heart speechless.